It was supposed to be just another summer evening, the kind where the sun refuses to set and the air hums with laughter, fireflies, and the innocent voices of children echoing through the trees. In a quiet neighborhood in Indiana, two siblings, 10-year-old Sarah and her 7-year-old brother Daniel, were playing their favorite game, hide and seek. Their parents were grilling in the backyard, neighbors were chatting over lemonade, and the world felt completely safe. But by the time the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah and Daniel had vanished. No screams, no signs of a struggle. Just the silence of two hiding spots that stayed empty long after the game had ended. Search parties combed the woods. Flyers went up overnight. Their faces were plastered across milk cartons, on local TV, and later national news. But days turned into weeks, then months, then years. Their disappearance became one of Indiana's most heartbreaking mysteries. Parents stopped letting their kids play outside. The local school held vigils. Candlelight memorials flickered each year on the anniversary, but no answers ever came. No suspects, no goodbyes. Just a heavy, aching silence that swallowed the town whole. Then in 2024, to 35 years later, during a simple renovation of the town's old post office, a forgotten letter was found wedged behind a loose panel inside an antique sorting cabinet. Yellowed by time and sealed with a faded butterfly sticker. The envelope was addressed simply, to someone who still cares. What was inside that letter would shatter everything the town thought it knew about the night those children vanished. This wasn't just a case of two kids who went missing. It was something far darker, something buried in guilt, protected by fear, and hidden in plain sight for more than 3 decades. Why did it take 35 years for someone to speak? Why was the letter never delivered? Most chilling of all, was someone still alive who knew exactly what happened that night? Before we unravel the full truth, do me one favor. Subscribe to this channel if you love true stories, long-lost mysteries, and emotional storytelling that digs deep into the human soul. You won't want to miss what comes next. In small-town America, stories tend to live long after the people in them disappear. People remember, they whisper, they wonder. But sometimes even the loudest mysteries fade, until something unexpected brings them roaring back. Sarah and Daniel McAllister weren't just another case file. They were a brother and sister, best friends, who disappeared on a warm July evening in 1989 while playing hide and seek in their own neighborhood. Their parents were just steps away. The street was quiet, safe, familiar. And yet in the blink of an eye, both children vanished without a trace. For decades, the community clung to rumors, false leads, and fading hope. Their story became part of the town's shadow, a tragedy that no one could forget and no one could explain. Theories came and went, but nothing ever stuck. No bodies, no suspects, just two names that haunted a generation. Then, in 2024, everything changed. A letter hidden away for 35 years was discovered inside a dusty, half-forgotten corner of the old town post office. The handwriting was shaky, the paper was brittle, but what it revealed was something no one was prepared for. It was a confession, plea, and most importantly, a clue. This is the story of what really happened that night. A story of childhood, secrets, fear, and the pain of silence that lasted 3.5 decades. It was July 8th, 1989. A warm Saturday evening in the quiet town of Wabash, Indiana. The kind of evening where children's laughter fills the air and everything feels safe. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the houses, trees, and freshly cut grass. Families were outside, enjoying the summer break. Parents were chatting on porches. Radios played softly. In the middle of it all, two young siblings, 10-year-old Sarah McAllister and her 7-year-old brother Daniel, were playing their favorite game, hide and seek. They had played it 100 times before, in the backyard, around the tall oak tree. Behind the old garden shed, they knew every corner, every shadow. Their giggles echoed through the neighborhood as they ran barefoot across the yard, counting and hiding like only children could, full of innocence and joy. Their parents, Thomas and Evelyn, were just steps away. Standing by the grill, flipping burgers, talking with the neighbors, it was a normal day. Nothing seemed wrong, nothing felt off. It was the kind of day where danger didn't exist, at least not in their world. At around 7:15 p.m., Evelyn called out, "Kids, it's time to come in." There was no answer. She smiled, thinking they were still playing, still hiding. She walked toward the garden, expecting them to jump out with laughter, but no one came out. The silence felt unusual. She called again, louder this time. "Sarah, Daniel." Still nothing. At first it felt like a joke. Maybe they were hiding really well this time. Maybe they wanted to win the game. But 10 minutes passed, then 20. The smiles faded. Thomas began checking behind trees. Evelyn walked up and down the block. A neighbor joined in, then another. The search grew wider, and the silence grew heavier. By 8 p.m., the mood had changed completely. Fear had replaced laughter. Panic set in. People started running, not walking. Flashlights came out, doors were knocked, names were shouted. The entire street, once calm and cheerful, now felt frozen in fear. A neighbor picked up the phone and called the police. By 8:25 p.m., flashing red and blue lights lit up the block. Officers arrived, asking questions, marking maps, bringing in dogs. What began as a simple game had turned into every parent's worst nightmare. Sarah and Daniel, two children full of life just an hour earlier, were gone, and no one saw a thing. The hours after Sarah and Daniel disappeared felt like a blur. What began as a neighborhood search quickly turned into something far bigger. By midnight, dozens of volunteers had joined the effort. People holding flashlights, calling out the children's names, searching every backyard, every alley, every wooded path nearby. Strangers who had never spoken to the McAllister family were now walking side by side with them, determined to find the missing siblings. By the next morning, the search had grown into a massive operation. Local police, firefighters, and even the state troopers joined in. Helicopters flew overhead, search dogs sniffed through fields, boats scanned the nearby river. People formed long lines, shoulder to shoulder, combing the area inch by inch. But there was nothing, not a single clue. No shoes left behind, no torn clothing, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the children had vanished into thin air. News spread quickly. Within 24 hours, their photos were on TV. By day 3, their faces were on milk cartons across the state. Headlines read, "Siblings vanished during game. No trace found." National news outlets picked up the story. Reporters arrived in town. Cameras stood outside the McAllister home, capturing the heartbreak of a family falling apart in real time. Evelyn McAllister, once a smiling mother of 2, now sat silent by the window, staring outside, hoping to see her children walk up the driveway. Thomas couldn't stop pacing. He hardly slept. Their home, once full of warmth, felt cold, empty, and echoing with a silence too loud to bear. They stopped eating meals together. They stopped talking about anything but the children. Grief swallowed them whole, piece by piece. Weeks turned into months, still no answers. Police followed hundreds of tips, none of them real. Some people claimed to have seen the kids at a gas station in another state. Others believed a stranger had taken them. But every lead ended in a dead end. Every door they knocked on led nowhere. The town changed. It had to. Parents stopped letting their children play outside. Backyards that once echoed with laughter grew quiet. People began locking their doors during the day. Strangers were no longer greeted with smiles, only suspicion. The innocence of the neighborhood had been stolen, and no one knew how to get it back. And in the middle of it all, 2 small bedrooms remained untouched, still waiting for Sarah and Daniel to come home. The days after Sarah and Daniel vanished slowly turned into years. The summer of 1989 had ended in pain, and the seasons that followed brought no answers. By the early 1990s, the search efforts had quieted. Police no longer knocked on doors every day. Reporters stopped visiting. The crowds disappeared, but the pain had never left. Every few years, the case was reopened, sometimes because a new detective took interest, sometimes because someone claimed to remember something. Files were pulled out of dusty cabinets. Old photos were re-examined, but nothing ever came of it. No new leads, no new evidence. Repeated over and over like a terrible dream. Evelyn and Thomas grew older, but they never truly moved on. They kept their children's bedrooms exactly as they had been in 1989. The same bed sheets, the same toys, the same drawings on the wall. Evelyn lit a candle in the window every evening just in case her children ever found their way back home. She told herself that maybe, just maybe, they were still alive somewhere. Taken, but not gone. Every July 8th, on the anniversary of the disappearance, the town held a small vigil. Neighbors, the crowd was large. Neighbors, teachers, classmates. But as the years passed, fewer people came. Some moved away, some grew tired, and some just didn't want to remember anymore. But Evelyn and Thomas never missed a single year. Even when it was just the two of them, standing in the cold with candles in their hands and tears in their eyes, they waited. With time, rumors began to grow in the shadows. Whispers filled the silence. Some believed a stranger had passed through town and taken the kids. Others thought it was someone they knew. A friend, a neighbor, maybe even someone in the family. Darker theories suggested an old family feud, or a secret someone was trying to hide. The police could never prove anything, but the damage was done. People started looking at each other differently. Trust cracked. By the 2000s, most people had given up hope. New families moved in. Children grew up hearing the story like it was some old ghost tale. The McAllister home, now worn with time, stood like a scar. Quiet, heavy, and untouched by the future. Evelyn no longer spoke much. Thomas stopped answering the door. They were no longer parents waiting for their children. They were survivors of something no one else could understand. No one knew what had really happened. It was early spring in 2024, to 35 years after Sarah and Daniel disappeared. The town of Wabash had changed. New buildings had replaced old ones. New families had moved in. But some places remained the same, holding pieces of the past like secrets trapped in time. One of those places was the old post office on Maple Street, a red brick building that had been touched in decades. Until now, a construction crew had been called in to renovate the building. The plan was to turn the unused space into a small museum and cafe. Workers began tearing down old wood panels, shelves, and cabinets that hadn't been touched since the late 80s. Most of it was dust and cobwebs, forgotten mail, rusted tools, faded posters. But behind one panel, tucked deep into the corner of an antique mail sorting cabinet, something unusual fell to the ground. It was a letter, yellowed with age, sealed with a faded butterfly sticker on the back. The envelope was soft from years of moisture, but still whole. There was no name on it, no address. Just 6 words written in shaky handwriting. To someone who still cares. Curious, one of the workers handed it to the site manager, who then gave it to the local police. At first, they weren't sure if it was important, until they read what was inside. The letter wasn't long, but it was chilling. The words felt like a whisper from the past, full of guilt, fear, and something else, truth. The writer spoke of a mistake that went too far, of the game that never ended, and of a place they called the Old Greenhouse. The letter didn't say any names, but it spoke directly about the summer of 1989 and 2 missing children. The town fell silent once again. The letter was sent to the state crime lab. Analysts studied the paper, the ink, the way the letters curved. They compared it to old handwriting samples kept in past case files. And then, after weeks of quiet work, they found a match. The handwriting belonged to someone the town had once trusted. Someone who had lived nearby. Someone who had never been questioned. The first time in 35 years, the case of Sarah and Daniel McAllister wasn't cold anymore. A voice had finally broken the silence, and it came from a place no one expected. The letter, once forgotten and buried behind a wall, had now become the most important piece of evidence in a case that had haunted Wabash for over 3 decades. Investigators read the note again and again, searching for meaning in every word. What stood out the most were 2 chilling phrases. The game went too far. The old greenhouse. It was never meant to happen there. The town didn't have many greenhouses anymore, but there had been one, just outside of town, abandoned since the early 90s, overgrown with weeds, boards nailed across the doors. Kids used to dare each other to go inside when they were young. Most never did. It was a forgotten place, but now suddenly it was back in focus. Police quietly reopened the investigation and visited the greenhouse. They brought ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, and a small forensic team. At first, Nothing looked unusual. Broken glass, rotting wood, dust, all signs of a building long ignored. But behind the greenhouse, buried beneath the earth under a cracked concrete slab, the dogs began to bark. The officers started digging. What they found was heartbreaking. Tucked in the ground were small, decaying items, a pair of children's shoes, a rusted bracelet, and beneath them, something no one wanted to believe. Human remains, two small skeletons, lying close together, side by side. Time had worn everything down, but dental records and DNA would later confirm what many already feared deep in their hearts. It was Sarah and Daniel. The discovery shook the town to its core. People cried in the streets. Strangers hugged one another. The McAllister home was surrounded with candles, flowers, and written messages of sorrow. But behind the grief was something else. A burning question. Who buried them there? The handwriting from the letter belonged to a man named Roy Lambert, a quiet man in his 70s, now living in a nursing home just miles away. In 1989, he was the town's mail sorter. He had lived near the McAllister family. He knew their routine. He had even attended one of the vigils in the early years. Police paid him a visit. When asked about the letter, he looked down for a long time. Then softly, with trembling hands, he whispered, "I never meant for it to go that far. We were only playing." But they wouldn't stop screaming. That sentence alone changed everything. Roy Lambert didn't try to run. He didn't deny the letter. Didn't ask for a lawyer. When police arrived at the nursing home, he simply looked at them and nodded, like he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. His hands trembled as they cuffed him, but his eyes stayed empty, almost hollow. The weight of the secret he had carried for 35 years had already broken him from the inside. During the interviews, he told the full truth. Back in 1989, Roy had been a quiet man. He worked long hours at the post office and kept mostly to himself. But what no one knew was that Roy had been watching the neighborhood children, not with love, but with something darker. He had no criminal record, no history of violence. But one evening, something snapped. He saw Sarah and Daniel playing alone, called them over, pretending to join their game of hide and seek. He promised them a secret hiding place, somewhere no one would find them. The old greenhouse. He told police that he had planned to scare them just a little and then bring them back. But once they started crying and trying to leave, he panicked. He told them to be quiet. He shouted. When Sarah tried to run, he grabbed her. When Daniel tried to defend his sister, he pushed him. And in the chaos, it was over. 2 young lives lost in minutes. No plan, just fear, guilt, and silence. He hid their bodies under the greenhouse floor and sealed the slab with concrete the next day. Then, terrified of what he had done, he wrote a letter, but never had the courage to send it. Instead, he stuffed it behind a panel at work, spent the next 35 years pretending to be a normal man. When the town heard the truth, people were stunned. Some were furious, others were heartbroken. There were those who had known Roy for decades. They couldn't believe it. Mothers cried for Sarah and Daniel like they were their own. Fathers felt guilt for not protecting their children better. Everyone asked the same question. How could someone live with that kind of secret? On July 8, 2024, exactly 35 years later, the town held one final vigil. Hundreds gathered, holding candles, standing under the same summer sky. The McAllister family, aged and tired, stood in front. There were no speeches, just silence, the kind that speaks louder than any words. Photos of Sarah and Daniel were placed beside a small memorial stone, surrounded by white lilies. 2 lanterns were released into the air, floating toward the stars. It was a goodbye no one had gotten in 1989. And now, at last, they were found. Some stories don't end with peace. They end with pain, truth, and a silence that lasted far too long. For 35 years, the silence around Sarah and Daniel's disappearance was like a heavy fog, thick, cold, and always there. It wrapped around the McAllister family, around the town, and around every person who once believed the world was a safe place. That silence didn't just hide the truth, it hurt people, stole time, stole comfort, and left an entire community haunted by what they didn't know. When Roy Lambert finally spoke, even through a letter, the silence was broken. The truth came out, and with it came grief all over again. But truth, even when it arrives late, is still powerful. It gives people a chance to mourn, to remember, and to finally say goodbye. The truth did not bring Sarah and Daniel back, but it gave their parents something they never had: answers. And in a way, it gave their children a voice, after so many years of being unheard. The hardest part about this story, just what happened. It said how long no one knew. And that is a reminder to all of us. We must protect our children with more than just fences and doors. We must listen. We must watch. We must teach them that the world can be both beautiful and dangerous, and that their safety should never be taken for granted. A game of hide and seek should never be the last thing a child ever plays. To this day, the town of Wabash remembers Sarah and Daniel. Their names are spoken in schools. A small memorial now stands in the place where the greenhouse once stood. 2 stone figures of a girl and a boy, holding hands facing the setting sun. People leave flowers there, toys, letters, and sometimes just silence. Because silence is no longer something to fear. It's a space to remember. And if there's one thing this story teaches us, it's this: the truth might take years to come forward, but it never truly dies. And neither do the memories of those we've lost. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it, because sometimes the only way to protect the future is by not forgetting the past. Sarah and Daniel's voices were lost for 35 years, but today you helped them be heard. Honor them by staying alert, staying kind, and never ignoring your instincts. And if you believe stories like this matter, subscribe for more emotional, true stories, forgotten mysteries, and the truths that deserve to be remembered. Turn on the bell so you never miss a story that could change the way you see the world. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay human, never let silence bury the truth.